You're such a saint, Sarah, my mom gushed, her voice practically glowing with pride as she clinked her wine glass against Sarah's. We don't know what we'd do without you. I stayed silent, my fork hovering over the untouched chicken on my plate, pretending to be deeply invested in the texture of the mashed potatoes. Across from me, Sarah just smiled, that glossy, self-satisfied grin she had perfected years ago. She didn't even glance my way. She didn't need to. She already knew I wouldn't say a thing. I couldn't. My name is Julia Mitchell. I'm 27 years old. An elementary school teacher who works too many hours and saves too little money. For as long as I can remember, I've been the one who picks up the pieces in this family. But nobody ever seems to notice. Not when Sarah's around. Sarah, the golden child. The magnetic, charismatic one. The daughter who could do no wrong. Me? I'm the dependable one. The one who quietly rearranges her life to fix the messes nobody else wants to deal with. The one they forget until they need something. For years, I sent money to my parents to cover their rising medical bills. Quietly, consistently, month after month, I skipped vacations. I lived in a shoebox of an apartment. I sacrificed nights out with friends. Meanwhile, Sarah soaked up all the credit, lounging in her curated life of rooftop cocktails and glossy Instagram updates. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. That helping them was enough. That love didn't need recognition. But love doesn't mean losing yourself. And one night, staring at my almost empty bank account after paying rent, something inside me broke. I didn't plan it. There was no grand announcement. No fiery confrontation. I simply stopped. I stopped wiring money to mom and dad's account every month. I stopped budgeting my life around their needs. I chose myself for once. Weeks passed, then a month. At first, nothing happened. No phone calls, no emergency texts, no tearful thank yous or angry accusations. I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Sarah had finally stepped up. That maybe, somehow, she was covering it now. But then, the calls started. It began with my mom's voice, tight with polite confusion. Honey, do you know if Sarah changed her bank info? The hospital bill didn't go through this month. Then it was Dad, sounding awkward and uncomfortable. Hey, kiddo, weird thing. The insurance payment's overdue. Do you know anything about that? Every time, I bit down on the truth until it cut my tongue. Every time, I told them, maybe you should ask Sarah directly. I thought, foolishly, they'd start to piece it together. That they'd see through her. That they'd finally realize who had been holding things together all this time. Instead, they defended her. She must be overwhelmed with work. Mom said, poor thing, she's just trying her best. My chest tightened with every word. It was like watching a magician fool an audience with a cheap trick you could see right through, but no one else could. And still, I said nothing. Until the Sunday that changed everything. Mom called, her voice sharp and brittle. Julia, your father's medication bills are overdue again. This is serious. I don't know what's going on with Sarah. But if something's wrong, you need to step up too. You can't just leave everything on her shoulders. The unfairness of it hit me so hard. I almost dropped the phone. I pressed the receiver closer to my ear, feeling the blood roar behind my eyes. Maybe you should ask Sarah, I said again, my voice tight and thin. Maybe you should really ask her who's been paying all this time. Mom didn't even answer. She just sighed and hung up. And that's when I knew. They would never, ever believe it unless it exploded in their faces. Twist the knife all you want, Sarah, but the truth was simmering, just waiting for the right moment to boil over. The final straw came 2 days later. Scrolling through Sarah's Instagram while nursing a headache. There she was, perched on some rooftop bar downtown, clutching a glittering cocktail in one hand and smiling like she hadn't a care in the world. #grind don't stop. The caption read, #blessed. My hand tightened around my phone so hard. I thought it might crack. Blessed? The same week Dad's medication was on the verge of cancellation. And Mom was crying to bill collectors on the phone. She was out partying like nothing was wrong. That was it. I knew it then. In my bones. I wasn't going to stay silent forever. I wasn't going to let her live in that gilded little lie while I drowned quietly in guilt. And as fate would have it, the opportunity came sooner than I expected. Mom texted the family group chat the next day. Family dinner. Sunday. Mandatory. 6 p.m. Mandatory. It was practically a summons. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew exactly what that dinner would be about. They were going to circle the wagons. They were going to talk it out. Which meant Sarah would play the innocent victim. And somehow, I'd end up the villain. But not this time. This time, if the topic came up, and it would, I wasn't staying silent. This time, if they pushed me, I was ready to push back. Hard. Sunday evening crept up faster than I was ready for. As I pulled into the driveway, I sat in my car for a long moment. The engine idling, the dashboard clock ticking louder with every passing second. Through the window, I could already see them gathered inside, Mom bustling between the kitchen and the living room. Dad slouched on the couch. And Sarah sitting pretty, holding court like she always did. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. I didn't want to go in there. Not really, but I had promised myself. This time, I wouldn't stay quiet. Pushing the car door open, I forced myself forward, step by step, until I reached the front porch. The moment I walked in, the smell of Mom's famous pot roast hit me, rich and nostalgic, tugging at the pieces of me that still wanted so badly to belong here. "Julia," Mom chirped, overly bright, "you're just in time. Come, sit." I forced a smile and nodded, hanging my coat by the door. Sarah flashed me a tight-lipped smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I felt the first prickle of warning crawl up my spine. Dinner started off normal, too normal. The conversation danced around safe topics, weather, work, random neighborhood gossip. I waited. The first real crack came after Dad's second helping of mashed potatoes. "So," he said, setting his fork down and wiping his mouth, "we need to talk about these bills." There it was. I could feel the tension snap tight under the table. Mom cleared her throat, glancing nervously at Sarah. "Sweetheart, maybe you can explain what's been going on? Your father's treatments can't afford another late notice." Sarah sat a little straighter, placing her napkin neatly on her lap like she was preparing to deliver a speech. "I've just been a little overwhelmed," she said sweetly, her voice laced with just the right amount of fragility. "There's been a lot going on with work, and with my finances. Things slipped through the cracks. But I'm handling it." She smiled, soft and wounded, like some martyr on a Lifetime movie. It made my blood boil. Dad frowned, the lines around his mouth deepening. "Handling it how, Sarah? These aren't small bills. They're critical." "I know, Dad," she said, lowering her eyes demurely. "And I'm sorry. I'm doing everything I can." The silence that followed was unbearable. Mom patted Sarah's hand, her own voice shaking slightly. "We know you're trying, honey, but maybe." She hesitated, and for the first time in my life, I saw real doubt flicker across her face. "Maybe Julia could help out too?" I froze. There it was, the final slap. The words lodged in my throat, burning. I could stay quiet. I could let it pass like I always did. Or I could finally, set it all on fire. I set my fork down with deliberate care. The metallic clink loud in the hush of the room. "I already have," I said, my voice steady but sharp. For years, all three of them turned to stare at me like I had just spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" Mom asked, blinking. I looked directly at Sarah. "You want to tell them? Or should I?" Sarah paled, but she held her ground. "Julia," she said, laughing awkwardly, "don't be weird. I don't know what you're talking about." My heart hammered in my chest. But my hands stayed steady. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small folder, laying it carefully on the table. "Bank statements, wire transfers, 3 years' worth of proof. I've been the one sending money to cover your bills," I said, my voice calm, even as anger simmered beneath my skin. "Not Sarah, me." The silence was so loud. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Dad stared at the papers like they were written in a language he couldn't understand. "And Sarah." Sarah laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her mask cracking for the first time. "You're trying to humiliate me? Over what? Some old payments? You're bitter. Julia, that's what this is about." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the years pressing down on my shoulders, and shrugged it off. You let them believe it, I said, each word slicing through the air. You sat back and took the praise. The gratitude. The love. You let them think you were the one saving them while I bled myself dry behind the scenes. And you didn't say a word. Sarah stood too, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't ask you to do it. She shouted. You chose to. Because I thought it mattered. I shot back. Because I thought family meant doing the right thing even when no one was watching. Mom finally found her voice. Shaky and uncertain. Julia, why didn't you tell us? My throat tightened painfully. Because I didn't do it for a pat on the head. Mom, I did it because you needed it. Because you're my parents. I didn't think I had to prove it. Dad looked between us, his face unreadable, the wheels turning painfully slow in his mind. Sarah was breathing hard now, her perfect image crumbling in front of all of us. And then, twist. She laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. Only bitterness. You think this changes anything? She spat. They'll always love me more. You're still the spare, the backup plan. You'll always be second place. Julia. The words hit me like a gut punch. But something strange happened. Instead of crumbling under them, I felt free. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. You're right, I said softly. You can have the spotlight. Sarah, I don't need it. I never did. I gathered my things, tucked the folder back into my bag, and turned toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Mom and Dad calling after me, voices filled with confusion and regret. But I didn't stop. I didn't owe them another second of my silence. Not anymore. The days after that dinner were some of the quietest of my life. I thought I'd feel regret, guilt, maybe even sadness. But what I felt was peace. Pure, unshakable peace. It was strange at first. Walking around my tiny apartment and realizing I didn't have to answer the phone every time it rang. I didn't have to brace myself for the guilt trips, the emotional blackmail, the endless cycle of expectations I could never meet. I was free. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. I stayed late at work without worrying if Mom needed help paying the electric bill. I went out for coffee with coworkers without that constant pit of anxiety gnawing at my stomach. I even bought a new bookcase, something I'd been putting off forever because every spare dime used to go to them. And for a little while, it was enough. But it didn't stay quiet for long. One evening, just as the sun was setting and the city was bathed in that soft golden glow, my phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. When I finally checked, there were 6 missed calls. All from Sarah. I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting instinctively. I didn't want to deal with her. I didn't want to hear whatever sob story she was spinning this time. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the last voicemail she left. Julia. Her voice trembled, raw and shaky. Please call me back. I need your help. I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. Then I laughed. A short, humorless sound. Of course she needed me now. I deleted the message without replying. 2 days later, I saw her. I wasn't expecting it. I was just walking out of my apartment building, heading to grab groceries, when I saw her sitting on the stoop. Sarah. But not the Sarah I remembered. Her hair was messy, her eyes ringed with dark circles, her usual polished appearance replaced by a rumpled sweatshirt and faded jeans. For a second, my heart twisted painfully. Then I remembered every smug smile, every time she soaked up my parents' praise, every lie she told while I suffered in silence. I walked past her without slowing down. Julia, she called, scrambling to her feet. Please, just talk to me. I kept walking. Please, she shouted after me, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'll do anything. The desperation in her voice pulled at something deep inside me. But I shoved it down. I wasn't ready. I wasn't willing to just hand her my forgiveness like a consolation prize. Later that night, as I curled up on my couch with a cup of tea, my phone buzzed again. A text. From Mom. Julia, can we please talk? We miss you. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about all the times they hadn't missed me when I was breaking under the weight of their expectations. When they believed Sarah's lies without a second thought. I set the phone down. Face down. I needed more than a few tearful apologies. I needed actions. I needed proof that they really understood what they had done, and not just because they finally needed something from me. But the next twist wasn't them. It was Sarah. 3 days later, a letter showed up at my apartment. Handwritten. From her. I almost threw it away without reading it. Almost. But something, maybe morbid curiosity. Maybe the tiny sliver of me that still remembered when we were kids and she used to braid my hair and tell me I was her favorite sister, made me tear it open. Her handwriting was messy, rushed, so unlike the carefully crafted image she used to present to the world. Julia. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I broke something between us that might never heal. I lied. I let you suffer while I took the credit. I was selfish. I was scared. I thought if I kept being the perfect daughter, Mom and Dad would finally love me enough. I thought, if they saw me as the one who saved them, maybe I would finally be enough. I never meant to hurt you. But I did. And I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know. You were always the strong one. Not me. I was just pretending. Sarah, I read it once. Twice. By the third time, my vision was blurry with tears I didn't remember deciding to cry. It didn't erase everything she had done. But it cracked something inside me open, not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe, the beginning of something different. Maybe the start of me not carrying her sins around like they were my own. I folded the letter carefully, setting it on the table. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange, shaky sense of hope. Not for Sarah, for me. Because no matter what happened next, whether she truly changed or whether she just faded out of my life entirely, I had already taken the first step toward saving myself. And this time, I wasn't looking back. The letter sat on my table for days, untouched, like a wound that hadn't fully scabbed over. I wasn't ready to respond. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to respond. But life has a way of pushing you forward whether you're ready or not. 2 weeks later, my mom called again, only this time, her voice wasn't desperate, it wasn't angry, it was tentative, careful, like she was handling something fragile. Julia, she said, after a long silence, we're having a small family gathering next Sunday. I know things have been strained, but we'd really love it if you came. I almost laughed. Strained was putting it mildly. Still, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked when she said, we. Maybe it was the fact that, for once, she wasn't demanding or guilt-tripping. Just asking. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before I could change my mind. The night before the gathering, I barely slept. Memories swirled in my mind, old birthday parties, family dinners, moments when Sarah would beam while I sat in the background. Invisible. Could I really walk into that house again? Could I sit in a room full of people who had so willingly believed the worst about me without question? Morning came too fast, and before I could talk myself out of it, I was standing in front of the house I used to call home. It looked the same, too much the same. The heavy oak door, the cracked stone walkway, the scent of Mom's lemon cleaner drifting out through the open windows. I took a deep breath and knocked. When the door swung open, it was my dad who answered. For a second, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he stepped aside and let me in. Inside, the living room buzzed with quiet conversations. My aunts, uncles, cousins, all pretending nothing had ever happened. And there, perched on the edge of the couch like she might bolt at any moment, was Sarah. Our eyes met. Something cold and sharp flickered between us. She looked different, tired, smaller, somehow. But the second she caught sight of Mom glancing over, she straightened her shoulders and forced a brittle smile. The act. Always the act. I clenched my jaw and moved further into the room, feeling every pair of eyes slide toward me. Lingering, measuring. Mom came over, her hands wringing nervously. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice shaking. "We're so glad you came." I nodded stiffly. Before I could say anything, Sarah rose to her feet. "I think," she began, her voice too loud in the sudden hush that fell over the room. "I think there's something we need to clear up." Here it was, the moment I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. Sarah glanced at me, her expression unreadable, then turned to face the gathered family. "For a long time," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. There's been some confusion about who was really helping Mom and Dad. Murmurs rippled through the room. Sarah swallowed hard, squeezing her hands together. It wasn't me, she said finally. It was Julia. The words hung there, suspended in the heavy air. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then my Aunt Karen gasped audibly. What are you talking about? Uncle Pete said, frowning. Sarah pressed on, her voice cracking. Julia's been the one sending money. Month after month, she's been helping with the bills, the hospital payments, everything, and I let everyone believe it was me. Shock rolled through the room like a wave. I caught a glimpse of my mom, her face pale and crumpled. My dad closed his eyes briefly, like he couldn't bear to see any more. Sarah's hands shook as she wiped at her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I lied because I was scared. Because I didn't want to lose the way everyone looked at me. But it wasn't right. Julia's been carrying this family while I was selfish. For a moment, there was only silence. And then, slowly, eyes turned to me. But not with judgment this time. With something heavier. Guilt, shame, regret. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, all I felt was tired. Tired of carrying the burden of being the good one. Tired of fighting for scraps of acknowledgement from people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Sarah's confession was a start. But it didn't erase everything. It didn't erase the years I spent drowning while she basked in borrowed praise. Mom took a shaky step toward me. Julia, she said, her voice thick with tears. I am so sorry. We were wrong. We should have seen it. We should have listened to you. I nodded once, tightly. I appreciate the apology, I said, my voice steady, but it's going to take time. You don't just undo years of hurt with a few words. The room shifted uncomfortably. Sarah looked like she wanted to say something else, but I cut her off with a glance. Not now. Maybe not ever. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding. Julia, wait, Mom cried. Please, stay. Let's start over. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Then I turned back, meeting her pleading eyes. I need space, I said quietly. I need to learn what it feels like to live my own life without carrying everyone else's. And with that, I stepped out into the cool afternoon air, letting the door swing closed behind me. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. For the first time in a long time, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. And as I walked down the street, I realized something. Maybe the real freedom wasn't about proving myself to them. Maybe it was about finally choosing myself over them. And this time, I wasn't going back. The door clicked shut behind me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The street stretched out before me, empty and open, like a blank page waiting to be written on. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew it wasn't back there. I walked without thinking, my shoes scuffing against the cracked sidewalk, my fingers numb from the cold air. Everything should have felt heavier. After all, it wasn't just my relationship with Sarah that had collapsed, it was the entire foundation of my family. But strangely, it didn't feel like destruction. It felt like liberation. As I rounded the corner, my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second, I considered ignoring it, letting it ring into the void like all the calls I'd silenced before. But something made me pull it out. It was a text. From Sarah. I'm sorry. For everything. I know it's too late. I needed you to know. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I turned the phone off and slipped it back into my pocket. Some things didn't need a response. Some apologies came too late. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of quiet and chaos. I moved out of my cramped apartment and into a tiny studio across town. A place that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I got a promotion at work. My principal had noticed how much extra time I'd been putting into lesson planning and offered me a lead teaching position. Funny how the things I thought I had to sacrifice for my family were waiting for me all along. And for the first time in years, my paycheck was mine. I bought myself a real bed. Not the lumpy hand-me-down mattress I'd been sleeping on for years, but a brand new one with a thick memory foam topper and crisp white sheets. I filled my fridge with groceries I liked, fresh berries, imported cheeses, Stupidly expensive coffee beans. I learned how to say no without guilt. To invitations, to obligations, even to my parents. It wasn't easy. There were days when the silence between us felt like it might crush me. Birthdays came and went without calls. Holidays were a mess of awkward text messages and broken promises. But it was cleaner, somehow, real, and I realized I would rather have uncomfortable truth than comfortable lies. One evening, about a month after the family gathering, I got another message from Sarah. "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but Mom and Dad are thinking of selling the house. They want us both to come by and go through old stuff before they put it on the market. Just thought you should know." I stared at the message, feeling a swirl of emotions I couldn't immediately name. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. Another part, a quieter, steadier part, knew I needed to go. Not for them, for me. So that Saturday, I found myself standing in front of the house again. Its once vibrant paint now faded and chipped. The lawn patchy with weeds. Sarah was already there, leaning against her car, arms folded tightly across her chest. Our eyes met briefly. No fake smiles, no rehearsed apologies, just the raw, uncomfortable recognition of everything that had passed between us. "Hey," she said awkwardly. "Hey," I replied. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend. We just walked inside. The house smelled different, less like lemon cleaner, more like dust and stale air. Boxes lined the hallway, photo albums, old dishes, piles of clothes that hadn't been touched in years. We moved through the house separately, each gathering what we wanted to keep. At one point, I found myself standing in my old bedroom. The posters I'd tacked to the walls were gone. The furniture stripped bare. All that remained was a small cardboard box in the corner. Inside were a few childhood drawings, a broken locket, and a stack of letters tied together with a fraying ribbon. Letters from me, to my parents, thanking them for little things, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Proof that even as a child, I'd been trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I pressed the bundle to my chest, my throat tightening, not out of grief, out of release. I didn't need to earn it anymore. As I walked back toward the living room, I caught sight of Sarah sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, her head in her hands. Without thinking, I walked over and sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between us. For a long time, we didn't speak. Then, quietly, she said, "I really am sorry, Julia, not just for the money. For all of it. For letting you be invisible while I soaked up everything you deserved." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. After a moment, she added, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. And I'm not asking for it. I wanted you to know that." I stared ahead at the empty living room. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, maybe not, but I'm not carrying it anymore." She nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And for the first time in a long time, I realized her guilt was hers to bear. Not mine. Not anymore. As we packed the last few boxes into our cars, the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of gold and crimson. I stood there for a moment, letting the cool evening air wash over me. This wasn't a happy ending. This wasn't a clean slate where everything was magically fixed. But it was a beginning. A messy, complicated, beautifully real beginning. And as I turned the key in the ignition and drove away from the house for the last time, I smiled, not because I was leaving something behind, but because I was finally moving towards something new. Something mine. Something free.